Yeah. For those of you that I have not had a chance to meet yet, my name is Jeff Duerler. I'm senior pastor, and this is a really exciting weekend for us because in one sense, it's like the culmination of this journey we've been on for 2+ years called Transform, but it's actually also the beginning of a whole new journey. And there are people right now that are about to embark on something, and just coming here was a big deal, or even just those who are following us through the live stream. And we just want to thank you for that. It takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there and to step into a new and unfamiliar space. And we just want you to know we did this for you. Like, we really felt like God was reaching out to you, and he wanted to use us. And so everything here is to reach out to you, and then for you to be a part of doing the same and bringing restoration to others. And so we welcome you on this journey. And as John and Doug both mentioned earlier, we're starting a new series today. And we tend to, in our weekend worship services, preach or teach through different things in a series. We kind of cluster it together, and we have different types of series here at LifeSpring. So, for instance, we just finished a study of the Old Testament book of Jonah. Later this year, we're going to begin and launch through a 15-week study of the book of Luke, just going chronologically through so that we can better not only better understand, but apply the Bible to our lives. Well, some of our sermon series are topical. And that's the case for this one. It's called Finding Your Way Back to God. And it is designed especially for those who feel you're far from God. But it's not just for people who maybe are new to God and faith and church and Jesus. It's actually for all of us. So just that statement, finding your way back to God, it probably has different reactions for you. Okay, for somebody, you might immediately resonate with the idea that maybe growing up or at a time in your life when, in the past, you felt close to God, you felt like you had a connection, but then something happened. And, I just hear many stories of people like as kids, that something happened with your family, with your parents, you moved, something happened in a situation. Maybe you've had a bad experience in a church or with Christians, and that is sometimes a pivotal moment that marks kind of a departure. And there's sometimes a point that you feel a million miles away. You don't even know if you could even get back to where you were. And then sometimes nothing big happened. You look back and you don't see there was no big trauma. It's just all of a sudden you realize over time, I just gradually drifted and veered. And now I find myself way over here, and I'm not so sure I even want to put forth the effort to get back to where I was. That might be you. You might be feeling that. And then there are some who the back part is what you're tripping over. Because for you, finding your way is not back to God because you never felt like you had a connection to God. And so you're intrigued. You're interested. You're curious in this idea. Maybe you're a little bit skeptical, but you're here. And we want to thank you for coming and exploring that. And then there are some who have maybe, a little bit of an edge. Maybe there's something about that idea, finding your way back to God, that's hard for you. Maybe even sparks a little bit of anger that may go back to a painful experience in your life. And there are many who may just yawn at the idea. I'm just keeping it real. Like, the idea of finding your way back to God does not feel compelling to you. It does not necessarily feel relevant with where your life is at this time and stage. And then there are probably a bunch of us in this room that feel like, oh, this sermon series is for somebody else. We maybe feel like, well, that's not my situation. I don't necessarily feel far from God. And yet, I want to tell you that from the senior pastor, from somebody who lives in this God space, I need to find my way back to God every week and sometimes every day. And here's why. The Bible uses this common metaphor or image of our relationship to God as a shepherd and sheep. And sheep, I've never been with animals like sheep, but what I've read about them and heard about them, and what I've seen in other animals like pets, is sometimes they just kind of wander off, and they just kind of don't, head down, and that's me. I'm just drifting. It's not like I'm off committing all these crimes, but I've just drifted from God in the course of in the middle of every day. Sometimes, guys, it can even happen on a Sunday. Seriously, I can find myself even just involved in a church service and being in a religious activity, and yet my heart is not close to God. And so if we're honest with ourselves, I think we could all say this is relevant to us and that we want to find our way back to God. And even if it's just detecting the rumble strips when we're starting to veer, and catching it quicker than when we find ourselves in the ditch. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And the bottom line is this: wherever you're at with this, whether you feel like you're far from God or not, whether you feel like it's possible or you feel motivated or not to come back to God, or even feel if it's possible, we believe the Bible teaches, bottom line, that God wants to have a relationship with you. He wants you to come home to him as Father, and he loves you. And the good news is this: it is possible for everybody, no matter where you've been, no matter what you've done, no matter what's been done to you. It is possible for every person to experience this relationship with God. And that's what we're going to talk about. That's what we're going to focus on for the next 4 weeks, today and the next 4 weeks. And we want to invite you guys, all of you, to come join us on this journey. So what's unique about this journey back to God is everybody has a different starting point or a different impetus. And some people's journey is like quick, it's sudden, and it's dramatic. And then for some people, it's long and it's arduous and sometimes feels uneventful with a lot of stalls or sidetracks down side streets. But there are some common mile markers, or we could call them awakenings, that everybody goes through in finding our way back to God. And we're going to talk about them. An awakening. An awakening is an act or a moment of becoming aware of something. Okay, so an analogy here would be maybe like waking up from sleep. For some of you guys, the loud alarm clock will suddenly jolt you awake. For others, you are in a situation where it's the slow, gradual light creeping into the room that wakes you from your slumber. I had an experience not long ago where I was chewing gum, and I was just like, man, this gum is awful. I just can't stand this gum. It's like totally disintegrating in my mouth. It's getting like little pieces stuck in my teeth. And then I gradually had an awakening that I had been asleep and that the wax earplug that started in my ear was in my mouth, and it wasn't gum. So that's an awakening. Sometimes it's quick like an alarm. Sometimes it's slow and gradual and painful in its implications. So here's what I want you to do. Turn to the person next to you and answer how you prefer or hate waking up. Do that now. Talk about how you prefer or hate waking up. So I know right now that there's a wife who turned to her husband and says, honey, I just love it when I feel you massaging my feet and putting a warm towel, warm washcloth on my forehead. No, everybody's got a different sort of answer to this. I hate it when you move in, but no. So awakenings, that's what we're going to talk about. Here's the 5 awakenings that we're going to look at. Today is going to be the awakening to longing. And that is that idea that's inside us, like there's got to be more. We're going to talk about that. Next week, we're going to look at the awakening to regret. And that's that awful, terrible, gut-sinking feeling of, I wish I could start over. And then there's an awakening to help. And that's the thought, I can't do this on my own. I need someone or something outside of myself. And then there's an awakening to love. And this is that wonderful experience, the revelation and the breakthrough that God loves me deeply after all. And finally, the awakening to live. And that's that sense of, now this is what I was made for. This is really living. And we want to invite you guys on this journey. We want to invite you to close the gap from where you are to where you really want to be, whether you even fully understand that or not. And so let's talk about the awakening to longing today, the awakening to longing. Have you ever had that moment, that feeling like of emptiness, like there's got to be more than this? Is this it? For some people, it leads us to go and do things that later we look back on and we think, oh, I wish I would have handled that differently. I wish I would have. There was something that was driving me and I thought this was the answer and it isn't. And sometimes it leaves us depressed and it leaves us anxious or shameful. It leaves us with addiction. Sometimes it leaves us just numb from it all. But here's the thing. Sometimes that longing for more isn't just what leads us to a place of being down and out. Sometimes it's part of being up and out. And what I mean by that is I got a friend who he had been through some tough stuff in his life. He'd been through a divorce and split family. And you guys who've gone through that, you know how hard that is, how difficult that is. And he started over rock bottom. And he scraped and he worked and he busted his butt and he spent a ton of hours and he actually worked his way up and actually developed a career he was proud of. He was in an influential position. He loved his job. He was doing great things. He was making good money. His family was coming back together. He had found someone. They were about to get married. But he had this sinking feeling inside, like, I should be happier. Like, I've got it all. I've got everything I was aspiring to, and yet I still feel like something's missing in my life. And that sent him on a quest to find his way back to God. And so I want to suggest to you guys, there are some universal longings that every single person who's ever existed around the world, every country, every culture has experienced. And they are these three: the universal longing for love. And by that, I mean just that sense of being accepted, that sense of being safe, that sense of being valuable, to care and be cared for, a universal longing for love. I think there's a universal longing for purpose, that sense of significance. There's a reason for my life. I'm not just sucking air, like I have an importance, a significance, like there's an aspiration for greatness in us all. That's a longing for purpose. Longing for love, a longing for purpose. And then there's a longing for meaning. It's a longing to make sense out of the broken world that we're living in, the pain that we've experienced in our past, some sense of and here it's kind of like, who am I? Why am I here? And where are we going? What's the whole point to this whole thing? There's universal questions. And so there are these universal longings that everybody feels, and they play themselves out in the art we make, the stories we tell, and the music that we write and that we sing. And so I want to do a little experiment here. I'm going to start a song with a few lyrics. I want to see if you can complete the lines. You can't always get, there you go, but I still haven't found, there we go. I was looking for love in all the wrong places, and I can't get no satisfaction. Yeah, so you guys got it. Now, those are classic songs. So let's do a little experiment. I did this just the other day. I was like, let's look at Billboard's #1 songs for this week. Not knowing what they are, not knowing these songs necessarily. And I said, let's look and see if these reveal that same longing for more. And so here's #1 in the genre of pop. I just want to taste it. I just want to taste it. Woo. Watermelon sugar high. I just want to taste it. I just want to taste it. Ooh. Watermelon sugar high. Thank you. You're welcome for me putting that earworm or whatever you call it in your mind that you're not going to be able to stop singing. I don't know what this song is about, but clearly there's a longing for something here. I'm not sure what. Let's look at the rock and alternative. I could never get attached. When I start to feel unattached, somehow always end up feeling bad. Baby, I am not your dad. No. It's not all you want from me. I just want your company. Girl, it's obvious. Elephant in the room, and we're a part of it. Don't act so confused. And you love starting it. Now I'm in a mood. Now we arguing in my bedroom. Okay, so this guy clearly is singing about conflict in relationship. Conflict that's messing up what he really wanted in a relationship with this person. Let's go to country. Let's see if country can also show this. So I hope you both feel the sparks by the end of the drive. I hope you know she's the one by the end of the night. I hope you never, ever felt more free. Tell your friends that you're so happy. I hope she comes along and wrecks every one of your plans. I hope you spend your last dime to put a rock on her hand. I hope she's wilder than your wildest dreams. She's everything you're ever going to need. And then I hope she cheats like you did on me. Oh, man. Gotta love country, the classic song about the disappointment of lost love and equally sad state of bitterness that comes out of it. Well, let's see if R&B and hip hop can help us out. Oh, I can't even read a single lyric from this song because they're all just terrible, crude descriptions about sexual activity. But you know what? I purposefully kept it. I could have just cut that one out and just moved on. But I felt like it was really important. I want to introduce an idea that maybe you've never thought about before. What if all of our desires, all of our human physical appetites of every form, including that sexual desire, what if that is not just animal instinct? What if that is not just a sort of evidence of depravity or something like that? But what if that is actually an inner longing and hunger for something deeper? And so here's my thought. What if the human preoccupation with sex is actually a symptom of spiritual dehydration? And what I mean by that is, what if that craving that people seem to have, that our culture seems to have, that you may be wrestling with yourself, what if that is actually just this deep inner thirst, and it's a longing, and the more frantic people become, more obsessed people become with it, is maybe actually an even increased sign that they're dying on the inside. Just think about that for a minute. There is, guys, a universal longing for love that sex has not been able to satisfy in human beings. And so what do we do with these longings and desires that are unmet? There's several ways that we as human beings react. And one is we pursue them even harder. It just spawns this frantic pursuit of, I have this longing for love, this longing for purpose, this longing for meaning. And so I'm going to chase it even harder. And so here's what this looks like. One shot of vodka doesn't quench the thirst. So maybe 2, maybe 3. Well, let's try 4, maybe 5. Vodka's a diuretic. It's not going to, satisfy your thirst. But that's what it's like in relationships. That's what people do. They're off to one, and that one didn't work, and move on to the next. And it's not just, I'm not just talking about going through quick one-night stands. I'm just talking about that, even just like in friendships, just like that longing to be saved, to be loved. And so just reaching and clinging to it. And sometimes the harder you cling to it, the more you're messing it up. And that creates all kinds of problems. And our songs tell about that, and we sing about that. But it's not just relationships, so it's also work. For some, the frantic pursuit of meaning pushes you, drives you. More hours, longer hours, working harder, getting to that next level, getting the raise, getting that job, transferring to that position. And it's just like this striving and this searching for more. And that someday, maybe then I'll feel significant, like maybe then I'll feel like I'm really important. Then I'm really doing something. And it's not just work or school, people push in for grades or to get into that college. It's also just our physical appearance and our possessions. Like, man, if I could just get those clothes, then I would feel good about myself. Or I could get that look or get that tattoo, then I would be really something, man. Then people would notice. Then people would think I'm really tough. Or maybe if I could get that truck and if I could get that lift kit, ooh, that would be it, man. I'd be lifted up. They would see I'm lifted up in importance, And it's like these things are driving us and we don't even know it, We're not even thinking that. We're just swallowed up in trying to satisfy a hunger and a thirst for identity and for purpose and for some sense of our destiny. And you know what we're doing? We're grasping at the wind. We're holding on to sand, and it's just slipping through our fingers. And so another approach is this, to kill and bury desire. And this happens in a couple different forms. So when dreams are shattered, when things happen in our lives, the breakup, the divorce, the death, the bankruptcy, the move, the job thing. When these things happen, what can happen is a part of us can die. And instead of being revived and trying harder, we kind of just give up. We just settle. We just think, well, that's just how life is. And I'm never going to find real love, or I'm never going to actually feel good about myself. And we just kind of settle into it. And another way it plays out is by trying to slay desire and shut it down. And here's the problem with starving the heart by burying the desires. You can only do it so long before it manifests in some way. So maybe it's the unexplained symptom that the doctors can't seem to track down, this thing that you're struggling with physiologically, may be coming from repressing and shutting down these God-given desires for purpose and for meaning and for love. Or, you find yourself late at night and you're opening the fridge or the freezer and you're pulling out and you're down in a whole quart of ice cream with the spoon and you're not even using the bowl. Like, what is that? Is that possibly trying to bury desire, and then it just plays out in some kind of crazy situation, surfing the internet, looking for some kind of superficial relief of intimacy that only creates more problems later? Like this, it's not working. And the way most men of character try to deal with some of the dangerous appetites, right, that we might feel is shut it down, cut it off. And believe me, that is far better than giving into it. But I want to suggest, what if there's a better way? What if the solution to unmet desires is not the frantic pursuit of scraping to find them, and it's not shutting it down and cutting it off, but what if there's a third way? And that is to awaken to the purpose of longing. Awaken to the purpose of longing. What if the rumblings that we have deep inside are actually gifts from God to stir us, to identify that there's a deeper need, that this thing is not satisfying? The way John Eldredge talks about it for guys with lust and temptation, he talks about the beauty behind the beauty. That fixation with what we think is going to satisfy is actually a longing for something far deeper that cannot be satisfied. And C.S. Lewis cannot be satisfied by this life. C.S. Lewis talks about this in The Weight of Glory. He says, the things in which we thought the beauty was located will betray us if we trust to them. It was not in them, it only came through them. And what came through them was longing. These things are good images of what we desire, but if they are mistaken for the thing itself, they turn into dumb idols, breaking the hearts of their worshipers, for they are not the thing itself. And guys, I am not saying desire is bad. I'm not saying all desires are good. There are things in our lives that we aspire to, a sense of purpose in raising our families and investing in our kids. And absolutely, that is a wonderful and a good. But if that is our ultimate aspiration that gives us a sense of purpose, we'll find ourselves disappointed. It will never be able to fully satisfy something. Life will come along and it will jerk the rug out from underneath us. And so these longings are here to drive us to something more. It's not the person, it's not the thing that we desire, it's what they represent in our hunger for longing for purpose and love and meaning. And this is what's so amazing about God, because he even uses temptations and destructive desires to awaken in us a longing for something more, something that would never be satisfied by that thing we thought we wanted. So the question is, will we become aware? Will we awaken to that idea that what we're longing for, that we're not experiencing, that we can't seem to find that satisfies us or is taking us down a dark path, is actually intended to lead us toward God? And that's the big idea today, guys. The longing to be loved, to find purpose, and to find meaning in our pain. That is given to us by God, and it's intended to lead us back to him. Now, Jesus told a story about this, and it's going to be our focus for all 5 weeks of this journey. As I mentioned earlier, some sermon series we'll study a whole book, and we'll go verse by verse, and some we just take one place in the Bible, and we just go deep. It's just a long chug on truth, and that's what we're going to do, because Jesus told this story about a lost son to help us find our way back to God. And so this is not a story about this younger son. It's also known as the prodigal son. It's not a story just about him. It's a story about us. This is our story. And so let's begin and look at what this has to say. God, speak to us now through your word, we pray. There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that's coming to me." And he divided his property between them. Now, couple things about this story that would help us really understand it. It doesn't tell us what the son's thinking, why he wanted to do this. It was certainly atypical. In that day, that the children were, everything was designed that they would care for their aging parents, they would receive the inheritance when their parents passed, and they would carry on the family business. So for the son to come to his father, younger son, come to his father and say, I want my share now, that was a huge and horrible insult. That was saying, I don't care about you. I wish you were dead. I want what's coming to me, and I want it now. Now, we don't know why the son did that, like what was pushing him, like what was motivating him. But we could surmise, he had this sense of, this is it, this farm life. Like, I want something more. I feel like I'm so repressed, like I'm inhibited, like I'm not getting to experience what life is really all about. So we see that in him, and frankly, we can't bash him because he basically articulated what we sometimes feel ourselves. Is this it? Isn't there more? So the father does it, which is really amazing. And let's see what happens next. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. Ooh. Okay, so he heads somewhere exciting. He heads to Vegas, to the West Coast, to New York City. And it doesn't tell us what he did. It leaves it to our imagination. He lived it up. We do know that later in the story, the older brother accuses him of wasting his inheritance, squandering it on prostitutes. There's an expression that's been attributed to C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton, maybe you've heard it. The young man who rings the bell at the brothel is unconsciously looking for God. It actually doesn't come from either of those guys. It comes from a 1945 novel, a Catholic novel. It's called The World, the Flesh, and Father Smith. And I want to give you the backstory here. It's just the story within the story. The author has a conversation, and it's between the book's protagonist, who's Father Smith, the Catholic priest, and he encounters this beautiful, seductive young woman, and she's standing on the front stoop. Her name is Miss Dana Agdala. She introduces herself to Father Smith. She says she's the author of this scintillating and best-selling book, Naked and Unashamed, and she says, perhaps you haven't read me. And so she mockingly asks this priest, tell me, do you get much response to the old story these days, meaning the story about Jesus? And so he invites her to walk along with him on to his next appointment. And there she begins to pepper him with questions. And one of the questions she asks about is sexuality. And she asks how he manages to, as she puts it, live without us. And so easily and confidently, here's how Father Smith answers that. He says, in his view, women's bodies are rarely perfect. They soon grow old and sag, and I'm not going to ask for an amen to that. And always the contemplation of them, catch this, always the contemplation of them, even at their best, is a poor and boring substitute for walking with God as a friend. I love that. And the woman says, aha, see, you've proved what I've always maintained about Christians, that religion is only a substitute for sex. And Father Smith responds, I still prefer to believe that sex is a substitute for religion, and that the young man who rings the bell at the brothel is unconsciously looking for God. Isn't that an intriguing idea? That the young man or the young woman who trolls Tinder is unconsciously looking for God. The man or woman who heads to the bar is unconsciously looking for God. Let's keep going in the story with the younger son and see how this plays out. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. That's always how it is. Something unexpected comes along, and it wrecks our plans for the good life. So he went and he hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. So this young Jewish man finds himself in an incomprehensible situation, the lowest of low. He not only is working with filthy swine that was off limits for Jewish people, but he's actually, in a sense, wanting to be a pig, wanting to eat the pig's food. And so what was going through his mind? Oh, man, surely he's pounded with regret. We're going to talk about that next week. But maybe he's asking the question, like, why did this happen? Why did this happen to me? You know, and anytime we experience pain, anytime life just kind of hits us with a blow, the diagnosis, the sudden news, the unexpected turn of events, like we're all still reeling from that, are we not? This whole pandemic and its implications. Anytime that happens, it just causes that something inside us just begins to ask that question, like, why is this happening? And for many people, it causes them to point a finger of accusation at God. Why is this? Why did you do this to me? And for many others, it's just the turning away from God, to even question his existence. But what if, even just asking that question, that wrestling with this is not how it ought to be, is actually indication of a longing and a desire for there to be a God of justice, for there to be a God of wholeness who can make things right, who can mend the brokenness in this world. And so here we have this man, and he's at a rock bottom situation, and he's wrestling with, no doubt, all these questions, and he's experiencing suffering. Suffering is sometimes the best spiritual alarm clock in our lives. Hard times expose our hunger. The problem is never the ache or the question. The problem is what we do with it and how we seek to satisfy it. So Jesus, he told this story to help us find our way back to God. He told a story of this young man who had a longing for something more, and it sent him on a journey far from home, and he found himself empty and filled with that same longing that was not satisfied. And I want to suggest to you guys something that may or may not feel a little unexpected. That what that young man may have felt, that feeling of, is this it? Surely there must be more. That is exactly what you should feel in life. And here's why. I'm not saying that every desire is good, but I'm saying that the intrinsic desire for love, that manifests in many inappropriate expressions, but that intrinsic hunger for love and intimacy and connection and friendship, and that the deep longing for purpose and significance, to have your life matter, and the deep longing for meaning, to make sense of this mess that we find ourselves living in, that is all put there by God. He's the one who planted that. And he wants that to be one of those awakenings in your life, whether it's a slow and gradual realization or a quick and sudden, that he is the one who can satisfy that. And so the question is, one, do I believe that I have a longing for love and purpose and meaning? Most of us, I think, would say yes. Maybe there's a few people who would say, no, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm just a robot. You know, I don't need anything. But most of us are going to say, yeah, I need that. So then the second question is, where do I go to satisfy that? What am I turning to for the thirst and the hunger that I have deep inside? Am I turning to God, or am I turning away from God? And sometimes the turning away from God is, well, let me just take this road as far as it goes and see where it leads, and then I will think about if I want to find my way back. And that's where many people find themselves. The oh no, the oh bleep, what have I done with my life? And that is where God is wanting to speak to you. That feeling, that sense, that is God, and he's reaching out and he's calling you back to him. And here's the thing. God wants a restored relationship with us more than we want that for ourselves. And that's good news. And so I'm going to invite the band to step up back on stage. That's what we're going to focus on, guys, for the next 4 weeks. We're going to focus on these awakenings that lead us back to God, the one who can satisfy our deepest longings. We want to invite you back. If you just came for this 1 week, you're not going to get the full good news. We want to invite you back. Here's the focus today: the longing to be loved, the longing to find purpose, the longing to find meaning in our pain that is given to us by God. And it's intended to lead us back to him. And I want to challenge you, wherever you're at, If you're somebody that's not religious, you're not a church person, you know, you're not sure about this Jesus, God thing, I want to challenge you to make a wager with God, to sort of bet in a sense, to bet for 30 days. Because here's the deal, you got nothing to lose. I mean, seriously, the end of 30 days, nothing happens, what do you got to lose? But you have everything to gain. Can you imagine what it would be like to not have to run after love anymore? To not have to wake up and try and come up with some sense of meaning and purpose to your day? To look back on your past and to look forward to the future, and to have meaning with both directions? Man, it's worth it. Would you make a wager? I challenge you to actually consider that there's a God of love who wants to have a relationship with you, who wants you to find your way back to him. And he's reaching out to you. Make a wager that he alone is the fulfillment to your longing for love and purpose and meaning. And it's going to involve praying, and praying may be new for you. Many of us, prayer's a regular part of our life. But I want to encourage all of us to pray a prayer that would go something like this. God, if you're real, make yourself real to me. That's for people who are uncertain. Many of us, we don't need to pray that part. We believe God is real. But the second part applies to every single one of us. God, would you awaken in me the ability to see that you are what's missing from my life? That my zeal to clean the house and somehow feel better after getting the house clean, that might actually be a deeper longing for some order in my life, or my longing for that special moment or experience with that person, or that adventure with my friends. It's not necessarily bad, but would you awaken in me the possibility that there's actually more to it than that? That there's a deep, deep longing for a spiritual friendship with you, God? That's what we're encouraging you to pray. God, if you're real, 30 days, what do you have to lose? Make yourself real to me. And that's our prayer this week. God, awaken in me. Open my mind to see that the longings I have, that they are actually from you, and that you are the one who can meet those deepest longings. And here's the deal. The words of that prayer are not magic, but there is absolutely something supernatural that happens, because there's a God on the other end who hears and who responds. The Bible is so clear about this. Come close to God, and God will come close to you. You will seek me and find me, the prophet says, when you seek me with all your heart. That is God speaking to you. I am no different than anybody else. I need to find my way back to God every single day when I start to wander and veer. And so I want to invite you, let's go on this journey together. God wants for us this more than we even want it for ourselves. Why don't you go ahead and stand? We've got a closing song.